Today is Monday, May the 3rd. This is World History. This is the last unit we're going to study before we get ready for our semester exam. We're going to look at the Cold War. Now, when I was doing this back in January, I didn't know how far I was going to get. So if you have this slide package, you'll probably notice that as we go through this, more pictures will be added and more videos will be added. At the end of World War II, Europe was in ruins. There was a great deal of chaos. Now, the major players going into World War I had been destroyed by World War II. So the French, the Germans, the Italians, the British, all of these were shambles of themselves. The only countries that came out of World War II powerful was the United States and the Soviet Union. Now, World War II had seen territories in Africa wanting independence. With no European powers left, these territories will quickly become free and independent states. The country of India is now a free and independent state. In China, the Chinese will resume their civil war that had been interrupted by the Japanese. The United Nations had begun at the end of World War II. The United Nations would take on a task of maintaining world peace. Now, what you see here is a picture of the General Assembly. Any nation in the world can be part of the General Assembly as long as a majority of the General Assembly agrees. There's also a Security Council. A Security Council is a small group of the General Assembly, and everything is run by the person called the Secretary General. Now, everybody in the General Assembly gets to vote for Secretary General. The United States had used an atomic bomb to end World War II. The Soviet Union quickly proved that it was testing nuclear weapons as well. The U.S. and the Soviet Union became world rivals. Now, for the U.S. or the Soviet Union to declare war on each other with atomic weapons was unthinkable. Military jets had made the launching of an attack on the other side down to just a few precious hours. With the advent of missiles, this is going to go into a few minutes. So a war between the U.S. and the Soviet Union was unthinkable. To persuade these newly independent nations to show their political and economic favor toward either us or the Soviet Union, a war of words began. This is what we call the Cold War. Soon, people who we supported in the Third World will be fighting against countries that the Soviets supported. This is what we call war by proxy. And this war by proxy is going to pit communism versus freedom fighters. Now, the first military battle to occur between the proxies was in Korea. Now, at the end of World War II, the northern peninsula of Korea was to be administered by the Soviets, the southern by the Americans. The idea was that in 1950 there would be a vote of the people, and the people would decide whether Korea should be communistic or free. Well, most of the people in Korea live in the south, and they're doing quite well. It is obvious to everyone who they're going to vote for. The population, the north, is going to then mount an attack on the south. The communist forces will push all freedom-loving Koreans near the city of Busan. The UN is going to call upon the United States and other military powers to repel the communist forces. Now, here is Busan right down here, that dot. Under Douglas MacArthur, the U.S. is going to mount an invasion near the city of Incheon. Now I'm going to go back one slide. Incheon is this city right here on the seacoast. The invasion at Incheon will be a great success, and the communistic forces will be caught in between, and they will be forced to travel to the north. The UN forces, the American forces, will follow along. Now, the communist Chinese were ruling the world that they feared an invasion by the UN. The communist Chinese will invade Korea in 1950, and they will drive the UN forces back to the south. Now, MacArthur, who had told Truman that the Chinese would never get involved, now has a plan to get rid of the Chinese. MacArthur proposes a nuclear attack on China. Truman says no. MacArthur is going to go to the press and say that Truman is tying his hands. Truman will fire MacArthur. For the next 2 years, Korea will be in a stalemate. Neither side is able to gain an advantage. It's only after China is persuaded to place demands on the North that an armistice is signed. That's where we are today. We're involved in an armistice. During the Cold War, we're going to find that Africa, Asia, and Latin America are going to create rulers that are basically dictators. They will rule the country, and then when they get old and gray, new dictators will emerge. And so you have this constant shuffle of strongman leader followed by strongman leader followed by strongman leader. Westminster College in Fulton, Missouri always invites a world leader to come to Westminster and give his or her views as to how they see the future. In 1949, Prime Minister Winston Churchill from Great Britain will come to Missouri and deliver what he calls the Iron Curtain speech. Here is a snippet of his speech. Now, as the Cold War began to heat up, the Soviet Union will begin to align itself with some of the Austria-Hungarian Empire countries that it had taken over during World War II. This alignment became known as the Warsaw Pact. The Warsaw Pact believed that if one country was attacked, then the other countries would come to the other's aid. So the Soviet Union felt that if there was ever to be a conventional war, it would have to go through the old Austria-Hungarian countries first. This would give the Soviets a chance to get ready. Now, during the Korean War, Joseph Stalin had died. There will be several years of turmoil in the Politburo, but Nikita Khrushchev will be elected General Party Secretary and political ruler of the Soviet Union. Well, Khrushchev believed that the future of communism lay in technology. Khrushchev predicted that the communist countries would surpass the West in the exploration of space and the use of education. In 1950, Khrushchev will travel to the United States. He will talk about the superiority of the Soviet Union, how he's got so much better education, so much better technology. Now, to prove this, in 1957, the Soviet Union is going to launch Sputnik. Sputnik will be the first satellite in outer space. 3 years later, the Soviet Union will launch Yuri Gagarin into outer space. He will complete an orbit of the planet. This proves that the Soviet Union is better than the US, so says Khrushchev. President Kennedy vowed that the United States would be the first nation to put a man on the moon. The space race had begun. Well, I think this is probably a pretty good spot to stop. You'll notice there were lots of holes in this. In class, they'll be filled by pictures.